Welcome to the Clone Cops podcast.
My name's Philip Cordell, co-writer and actor in Clone Cops.
Hi, I'm Danny Dones. I'm the co-writer and director.
I'm Charles Royce, VFX Supervisor and producer.
And I'm Corey Allen, cinematographer. Excited to have you here with us today. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the origins of Clone Cops in the story. So let's jump right into it with Phil and Danny. Would love to hear a little bit about where the story came from, where the idea originated from, and how we got started down this path.
Yeah, so this was probably, 2019? It was after pandemic. I was approached by a friend who had an in with some producers that were trying to figure out how to make movies for less than like $20,000. And so they were looking for ideas.
Micro budget
movies. And I was spitballing some ideas with a friend of mine, Dallas. And he threw out the name Clone Cops. And the movie really kind of started from there because I thought, like, well, maybe that's something we could do on super cheap. We definitely could not have done this movie for $20,000, but it was kind of the impetus for everything, and it started the ball rolling. And then Phil and I got together. We had already been writing and working on stuff from a pilot called Prince of Pools to the Nashville Dads Club streaming series. We did 2 seasons of that. So we were looking for a project that we could jump into that was a bigger scope.
The feature, right? We were like, we got to make a feature. As every short filmmaker or episodic knows, like that next goal is like, we got to make a movie.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we had originally talked about making Charles' movie, Real, and decided that the budget on that was going to be out of reach for us.
Yeah.
And so we kind of went back to the drawing board and tried to figure out something that we could do for a little bit cheaper.
And budget was out of reach because it takes place on water. It has kids. It has some, some things
Stunts,
where it's like
yeah.
some stunts, right? Where it's like, man, most of it takes place in a house. And as any low budget indie filmmakers know, we're looking to make that contained movie. But there were a few elements that were just like, oh, we just can't quite do this cheap and safely, right?
Out of reach, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So from there, we each kind of came up with some ideas and made a list of like possible ideas.
That's
and
right. I remember that.
The three of us, and we kind of pitched them to each other, and Clone Cops is the one that we landed on.
And I remember the first time I heard the name, I was like, that's dumb.
Oh my God, I spent so much time going, you guys.
Yeah, we're not
the
making a
right
movie
name.
called Clone
Clone
Cops.
Cops.
And it's just one of those things where like it sounds ridiculous, but when people hear it, they immediately know. So you're looking for, what some people call high concept, where it's just like, oh yeah, I have an image of what that is.
Yeah.
That sounds ridiculous. And to sometimes people are like, yeah, that sounds dumb. And some people think that sounds rad and exactly what I want to watch.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I remember when I was telling people about the movie, and I would tell them the title, you'd see their eyes light up. For me personally, it was a bonus because people would be like, "Oh, I'd watch that," like just based off the title.
Just title alone.
Yeah.
It just rolls off the tongue, too, and it's super memorable.
Yeah, I remember Chris, my husband, he first heard it and he was like, oh yeah, that's perfect. That's amazing. It rolls right off the tongue. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, and this is a great opportunity to talk about how important like the most simple things are, right? I mean, the marketing begins at naming the film, and that's why you get Wolfman and Dogman and these things where it's like, oh, yeah, I think I know what that is, and I automatically have an impression about it. I don't wonder what's going on. I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds like something I'd be into.
Yeah. Any kind of man, any man movie I'm into.
Spider,
Bat, all the man movies I'm down.
Wolf,
Does that mean we're making a clone man?
Clone
next?
Man, yeah.
Clone man.
Clone Man.
That's great. So tell me a little about some of the early inspirations for the story itself. So I know how we got to Clone Cops as a movie in terms of an idea, but when you think about some of the different storylines that pull through, what were some early inspirations for kind of charting out what the story of the movie would be?
Well, I remember when Danny pitched it to me, it was like, it's just cops. And they just keep on coming. Like that was the idea. We were like, cool, so how do we layer that and make that a bit more interesting? Like we've got a rockin' title that seems to be evocative for people. So now how do we build a story out and a world out around that is actually going to be interesting, not just to viewers, but to us? Because at the end of the day, we got to love the movie that we're making. It wasn't a how do we make a thing that's going to impress people, because that's a great way to make stuff that nobody wants to see. when you're worried about making stuff for other people, right? So we're like, what's the movie we want to make? And if we only get one crack at it, it's got to be a spectacle. So how are we going to work in a bunch of really eye-popping, interesting things? And so from the story perspective, Danny, what were some of your influences?
Well, I mean, I think certainly as the movie progressed, we leaned heavy into like Paul Verhoeven kind of stuff, and like Robocop and the satire that Verhoeven brings to a lot of his films was heavily influential. But I think early on, one of my big things was Multiplicity with
Michael
Keaton, and I just loved the idea that as they were replicating, they were getting dumber. That to me was a really important through line for the movie, and that was where a lot of the comedy was going to come from. Is that the more of them they made, the dumber they got, and I feel like we kind of framed a lot of the plot elements to work within that framework. So that was a big part of it early on. And then, yeah, I mean, just movies of the 80s and 90s. I mean, I remember we went round and round for the first couple drafts because I opened the movie with the title was The Future, 1999.
Right.
And
which is brilliant, but didn't land for some people. They're like, I don't get it. 1999's past.
Yeah. And they're like, yeah, that's
right.
the joke.
That's the joke. Yeah, exactly.
The joke.
Really simple, guys.
Yeah, it was, but I mean, that was kind of the vibe that we wanted to set, was that like, this is the future as we imagined it in the 90s, you know, and like, this is what the future's going to be like. And it's going to be all this high tech stuff that, you know, the reality turned out to be so much further beyond. We thought we'd all be walking around with vector graphics on everything and push button controls. And we've got these sleek, you know, 6K screens with touch controls. It's much more Star Trek Next Generation than it is Robocop.
Yeah, and that brings up a good question I've heard a few times in screenings and other places. Well, when is this movie based?
The Future, 1999.
Got it.
Right.
No, I don't think there is like necessarily a year that we've set for it. I think we just kind of wanted this amorphous idea of like, what's the future going to be like when the like dumbness wins? When you keep like making everything for the lowest common denominator, what does that turn into? What does that? And so, I mean, in a lot of ways, like Idiocracy is kind of another inspiration for the movie, because we definitely play around with a lot of those themes as well. It's like everything's kind of like automated, and you don't have to be a serious tech. You can learn everything you need to know about running a replication pod from a training video.
Right. And I would say from a influence standpoint, I remember discussions about like the Agent Smith battles in Matrix, right? Or it's like, well, I mean, that's a bunch of clone cops, you know, are we doing that? Kind of, but not exactly.
Yeah.
I've been watching a lot of Westworld, the TV show, which the first few seasons of that I thought were just stellar.
Great.
And and there was a lot, you know, there's some, if you've seen our film, you'll see that there's some wrinkles in there that are similar to some things that happen in other films, which is to be expected. And that's why we've got a line in there at the end where it's like, you want a Westworld situation on your hands? I don't think so.
Juice them.
Yeah. Juice them up.
I mean,
Yeah. So that's great from an origin standpoint. What about like own personal experiences that influenced anything within the movie? Did you pull some of that into those stories that exist with each of the characters?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's inevitable, right? I think as a writer, you always lend your own experiences and your own personality to all the characters, and that's certainly having a co-writer certainly helps break that up and make it so that every character is not the same. But yeah, there's a little bit of us in every character. So certainly there's some of the more serious scenes in the movie are drawn from my personal life and things that were important to me to say. So I still get a little teary-eyed in a couple of the scenes because of that. But yeah, I definitely pulled. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, as playing the clones, I got to pour so much of myself into the characters, and you know, I'm a pretty goofy, silly dude. You know, there's certain things that really get me going in life. I love to dance.
I like dancing.
Yeah, and so I knew that we needed an epic dance scene because
I like dancing.
it's so clear. Yeah, man. So from a what do I want to say with this character? It's like that you can have fun, that there's a lot of different facets to every human. We've got some serious stuff, we've got some ridiculous stuff, and I do believe that that's in every one of us. Even like the most hardened, badass individual out there has this goofy side to them typically, and if you get close enough to them, you'll get to see that. And so I was really looking to kind of bring that out through the clones and show everybody, like, yeah, it's okay to have fun, it's okay to be silly. You know?
No, that's great.
Well, and I would ask you guys too, like, because certainly within the script and within the, what we wrote, we injected our personal lives into it. But what about what you guys brought to it? Like, what about the visual aspects of it? How did y'all incorporate your personal lives into that?
Yeah, for me, at first, that's a great question. When we filmed in 2022, our set was still operating under COVID restrictions. So anytime the camera was rolling, it was just me and the actors on set. So I felt super connected to them, both in the funny scenes that we were shooting, but also in the really intense emotional scenes. Like there's a death scene that like really got me because it was just me and those actors, and like they did an incredible job putting that on camera. But me being in that space, I felt like my own emotions kind of translate through some of that camera movement too, just trying to be a fly on the wall and like reflecting on similar life experience I had, which was a unique experience at the time.
Those actors being Laura Holloway, Allison Shrum.
I don't want to give any death scenes away, but
I
yes.
know, but I get that, but we'll just name all the ones that were involved, and Quinlan Ash, and they all just did such a phenomenal job, that they deserve to be shouted out because they really brought their A game. I don't think I'd heard that from your perspective, and that makes perfect sense because I still see that scene, and it just feels so real, and I'm like, man, that's some serious acting being done there,
Absolutely.
Totally.
And let me ask you, I do want to hear, Charles, what you have to say about it, but also to follow up on that, a lot of cinematographers don't do their own camera work. Did you feel like it was important to you to do your own camera work so that you could put that in there?
Yeah, I think for me, obviously, especially being my first feature and knowing some of the time restrictions we had, it just felt right to be on the camera from a let's figure it out and move through quickly, but also to be connected to what was going on and knowing that we would be essentially a closed set anytime the camera's rolling. I didn't want to like influence the movie from Video Village. I felt it was really important at the time to be in the middle of everything to keep it moving. So.
And keep it moving.
Keep it moving.
You did.
There was a lot. So as a visual effects supervisor, there was a lot of movement going on. We had so many screen replacements and that sort of thing. And working with Corey's amazing camera work was difficult and challenging at times. But I mean, overall, it allowed me to learn a lot because, again, this is my first time as well with the VFX. But I loved the final product of what we accomplished together on some of those scenes. But as far as injecting my personality into it, I have a graphic design background of like almost 30 years, I guess, 35. And so the branding part of everything was really fun, and to get in your guys' head and kind of bring that to life and play around, and with the visual inspiration from the guy who did the T-shirt design. Who was that? What was his name?
Chris Butler?
Yes.
That did our concept artist?
Yes, the concept art was amazingly inspirational to kind of take that to the next level, and coming up with the Nefari Corps name because we had something else at the beginning.
Nile, that's right.
Yep.
Yeah.
We couldn't use that because it was taken.
Didn't pass clearance.
Yep.
We'd had a script clearance.
Yep. And so all of that work on the logos, I mean, the Nefari Plus and the pharmacy and all the different things that we had, it was just so much fun. And the visual effects stuff is where I relied on a lot of other art and brought my own kind of thing into that art. And that's the only way that I could do all of the visual effects in the amount of time that we needed. But I'm really super happy about what I got to learn from it and what I got to bring to it, my own voice. So I appreciate you guys for letting me do that and trusting me with it, because it's a lot. It's a lot of work, but I mean, from everybody's perspective. And it was so much fun. And I'm not sure I want to do that again. But man, I learned so much, and I had a blast doing it.
Well, and in a lot of ways, you were kind of the third writer on the movie, because all the little in jokes and stuff that appeared in the Crime Time 360, from the scrolls at the bottom to the ad copy to like all the posters and graphic materials that are appearing in the background, and like even little things like we made little magazines and stuff. That was all you wrote all of that stuff. Did you enjoy that, or were you kind of frustrated that we gave that to you to do?
Oh no, I that was my favorite part of everything. Like just coming up with those ads in the middle of Crime Time 360 and all this stuff scrolling across the bottom. That was all written by me. The chat was the chat. But it was so much fun, and a lot of those some of them that didn't even get used are some of my favorite pieces. But all of that was a blast. I was like, "You need something else? Let's do it." Yeah, let's do it. Yeah,
that's my sister. She said they're going to go back and watch it and like go frame by frame so they can read all the stuff that's in the bottom.
That's great. Yeah, I've seen the movie at least 200 times, and every time I watch it, I catch something different in the chat, or something more unique in the ads that scroll, or some of the little Easter eggs and stickers and things that exist on the walls. It's just super fun. Very rewatchable.
Yeah. So speaking of ads, probably a great time to mention that today's episode is brought to you by Nefari Corp. Dead Air don't sell replicants. Nefari Corp does.
Visit us at nefaricorp.com.
nefaricorp.com. Mm-hmm. That's great. Let's pull back to the story a little bit, because in a future episode we'll spend a ton of time on the look and some of the design work that Chuck and I put into it. But how different is the final product that we can watch on screen today from the first draft that we wrote?
Pretty different.
Yeah. It's. I mean, I think the core elements are still there. We didn't change a lot about the actual theme of the movie. That's all pretty much locked in from the first draft.
What is that theme, Danny?
The theme is about the commodification of humanity, and how media conglomerates and mega corporations use fear and division to make money. And in separating us from our dollars, they're also separating us from each other.
Sounds fun and lighthearted.
Sounds great.
Sounds a little real.
Yeah. It's. I think that is kind of to go back to what I was saying about Verhoeven. Like, that's what I like about satire, is that it allows you to kind of slide in serious themes with a veneer of comedy, and maybe it makes a bitter pill a little easier to swallow, and you can kind of like get some ideas past people's defenses, and maybe change a few minds and open a few hearts. But yeah, to go back to the question. Let's see. I know Porter was originally a man, and then as we were auditioning, when we saw Laura Holloway's audition tape, we were blown away by that, and we definitely thought like we should make a change. We should make a change there and cast someone else for that, and we rewrote that part.
We'd been on a vision quest to Bonnaroo as well, where we had spitballed some of these ideas about how cool it would be to have that mother-daughter dynamic, while also discovering some rad music that initially was in the film and then ended up being too expensive for the final product.
That's right. But if you, can we drop it? Can we name drop it?
Sure.
Because we changed the song, but we didn't change the edit. So if you fire up Noga Era's Nails during Farah's basement music video portion, then it matches perfectly, and it's a banger. But
again, on that indie filmmaking tip, for anybody wondering about licensing music, her label here in the States is Warner, and they were happy to grant us a festival license for $1,000. But when we landed our distribution deal, which we'll get into the details of, into the nitty-gritty of in future episodes, and went back to them essentially saying, hey, so we didn't get anything up front. We don't really have any additional money. Can we just extend this, for another $1,000, a couple $1,000 off? Then they're like, oh no, that would be probably $20,000 to $30,000 typically for this type of usage. So got together with my homie Jaron Johnston of the Cadillac 3, and he and I put together a banger, and that's what's in the final version of the film.
And who was singing on it? Because she's amazing.
Yeah, Denisha is singing on that under her pseudonym Deo, which is what she does some of this stuff on. But yeah, her voice is just incredible, and And again, she's a rising star in the Nashville scene right now, and so we're real fortunate that she had some time to come over and hang with us and do the deal.
So cool.
Well, and it fits the edit better. What we ended up with after shooting is that song fits better, and that is probably another way that the movie changed from its initial inception. Is that we thought of it as like an action comedy first, and in the creation of it, I realized like I'm not super proficient at directing action, and we did have a stunt coordinator on set for some of the one big stunt day, and that's something I learned on this, is that we really would have benefited from having our stunt coordinator Julian Joyner on with us more, because she was able to set things up in a way that just really brought all that action stuff to life. And I can definitely tell when I watch the movie between the days that we had her and the days that we didn't.
Oh, yeah. I mean, she did such a great job, not only with the coordination of the stunts, but also just general direction, camera blocking, like, expert in all things to make it look really good on camera, which was great.
Yeah. But so that the movie kind of changed from an action comedy to more of a sci-fi comedy. And we decided in the edit to play up those elements, the comedy elements and the sci-fi stuff a lot more than the action stuff.
Yeah. 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 Rick.
Yeah.
Ted Welch, those ad libs.
Yeah. Brick changed a lot. Mm-hmm. He changed. Now, his character didn't change. His character stayed exactly the same. He's probably the one character that we didn't change. I feel like everybody went through some kind of permutation except for Brick. He was always that guy.
But Ted gave him such an actual life and a voice, right?
Yeah, 100%. And yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah.
That's the one.
Yeah.
But he, if we had a fourth writer, it would be Ted, because he ad-libbed so many of his lines. And
and he's a writer on his own right, and is just a brilliant actor and brought a lot to that character.
He brought a ton to it. Yeah, and he really brought it to life.
That's awesome. So made it through several versions of the script, several different drafts, eventually made it to a table read, I would imagine.
We did. Table read at Chucky's beautiful high-rise condominium. Yeah, up. I mean, it was probably one of the classiest table reads ever, And we had brought in a bunch of great talent, and we ran through the whole script, and it was weird and wild and fun. But at the end of it, Danny and I had the same notes, right on the front page of our script, which was needs to be funnier.
Needs to be funnier. Mm-hmm. It was definitely. I mean, I think in spitballing it to each other, we definitely made each other laugh a lot. But I think that was more just because we're fantastic performers.
Yeah, right. And you can't line read everybody to be like, you should say it like this. Trust me.
Can I stop you right there?
Please.
That's the third time you've said spitball. And I think it's spiffball, isn't it? Spiffballing?
No.
Because spitball?
Spitball.
Something I wish I knew at 25 that I didn't learn until 43. It's spiffball? No, I think it is spitball.
It's spitball.
It's spitballing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes it grosser, huh?
Y'all, look it up. I'm not sure about that.
All right, I'll fact.
Anyway,
We'll do that at the break.
More later on that. Sorry.
We'll catch that in the fact
I
check.
can't think about anything else.
You have to tune into episode 2 to discover if it's in fact spiffballing or spitballing. Spoiler alert, it's spitballing.
Thanks, Chuck.
Yeah, I mean the table read was great. I think we ended up with like 50% of that first table read wound up in the movie. We hadn't done our casting yet, and we reached out to some of our friends that we were just knew would come out and were down to hang and to do the thing with us, and they were awesome, and we had a great time with them. But yeah, it was definitely interesting that's as a writer, if you're looking for a tip, have a table read. It was so valuable, and it really highlighted like the things that were working and the things that weren't. And yeah, I came away with that with a totally different perception of the script and where we were at and how much more work we had to do, which was a lot.
Right, because the initial thing, right, as a writer, and any writers out there, as you know, there's something so incredible about finishing a draft. And you're like, oh, no, I want to send it to the world, you know, and it's like, it's probably not ready, right?
It's never ready.
It's never right. I mean, that was a real learning experience for me and Chuck and I's writing and Danny and I's writing, where it's like, yeah, we got this thing, we think it's good, we send it for coverage, and all of these holes or weaknesses are exposed. And you know, being in the position we're in now, people try to send us a lot of scripts now all of a sudden, right? Because we made a movie and we've made some streaming stuff. And legally now we've been advised not to read people's scripts because we may be working on a similar idea. But I can tell you, I have seen that impulse that I know I had, which is like, cool, I finished the thing. Now I need to send it out and let people read it. And frequently it's just not, you know, it's like, oh, okay, cool. And here's the other thing, man. You may only get one read from somebody. I can tell you most people are not going to read this one and then wait, you know, and then read a second revision in 6 months or something. It's just like, yeah, man, I already gave 2 hours to that thing. Right. You know, and life moves on. So make sure it's as polished as it can be before you send it out for coverage, for notes. You know, if you know you've got, man, I know a producer and I think I can get him to read my thing, get some coverage first. Make sure it's as good as it can be before you send it out.
We did get coverage done before the table read.
We did.
I remember that. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know that you could pay somebody to read your script. That was totally new to me.
Yeah, and having that like unbiased third party where it's like they're not invested in anything except letting you know their honest opinion. And sometimes
and pitching you their ideas.
What does that cost? Just out of curiosity.
It fluctuates.
Yeah.
I mean, you can get it. I've seen it as reasonable as $50 up to $250. You know, I mean, there's a wide range.
Package of like 3 people and some.
Yeah, there are some services you can use, and then there are some just script consultants. You know, most of them are based in LA, and they're happy to read your thing. And I do think that on the whole, that's money well spent because it's pretty reasonable, and again, gives you that unbiased third party view. Because I can send it to Danny, and it's like, oh yeah, see what you're trying to do here. It's great.
No, rip it to shreds. No, I think that is the key, right? Is that it's unbiased. Your friends are all gonna, if you can cajole a friend into reading your script, which that's a big ask. Yeah, they're gonna be like, oh yeah, it was great. They're not gonna give you notes. They might give you like, oh, maybe this part you could change, but when you send it out for coverage, they tear it to pieces, and it can be discouraging too. And that's another thing to be on guard for. Is like, hey, these are professionals. Their job is to tear this to pieces. So don't be discouraged when it comes back ripped to shreds, because it's like, oh great, now I know what to work on. That's a good thing.
Yeah, it's like putting something up on Blacklist. And you're like, cool, I got 8s and 9s, here we come. Like 4, 5, no. Structure and dialogue, you know, characters aren't developed.
Yeah.
All these things that just, you know, there's so much that's in our head that we take for granted that the reader will know. And it's like they don't know anything beyond what's on the page. And so if it's not clearly spelled out, hopefully in an artful way, then no, it's not going to translate from your head to the average reader.
Yep.
Yeah. And then what was that emotion like at that first table read? I'm sure largely that was the first time you had seen and or heard like the movie play through completely. Were you nervous? Were you excited? What was that like as a writer?
I mean, I think the fact that they were mostly friends, I mean, all of them were friends. Mm-hmm. We didn't pay anybody for the table read, so they were all just friends that came out to help us.
Actors.
Yeah, they were pros and they were great. So I wasn't nervous necessarily, maybe a twinge, just because it was like, all right, we're putting our thing out here, and you know, people are going to hear these words for the first time. But I think for me it was mostly just excitement, because I thought, man, this thing is funny. Like, this is going to be a laugh riot, and everybody's going to be having a great time today doing this read. And yeah, and
they did have a good time.
They had a good time. And to their credit, they took the dramatic parts and made them dramatic. I mean, maybe that's something that Phil and I don't necessarily do when we read to each other. We're playing up the laughs. And they were definitely sinking their teeth into the more dramatic pieces of it. Yeah, I think I was a little disappointed, I think, that it didn't get more laughs. But again, that's
why you do a table read.
It gave us the opportunity to be like, oh, okay, so we need to pump up the jokes. And I think that's part of the rewriting process. And we've talked a lot about writing comedy is the first joke you come up with is the one that everybody comes up with. Right. That's the most obvious joke. And then the second one is the second most obvious one. And so by the time so you need to keep working them. And by the time you get to the third or fourth iteration of that joke, that's you. That's your personality and your sense of humor and what you can bring that's unique to the world. So yeah, joke writing is rewriting over and over and over again.
Yeah, and it's so subjective. I mean, we're lucky to have each other, right?
Yeah.
Because like we're kind of in tune in terms of what we think is funny and what we're proud to put out there. But like I know that not everybody's going to think our movie is funny, and that's okay. Like it's not. Again, back to that idea of like you can't make a movie for everybody. You got to make it for yourself and hopefully for people like you and trust that they'll find it. And that's been one of the most just rewarding aspects of this thing is our movie already being out there for now a week and it finding an audience and finding weirdos like us that think it's hilarious,
Well, and I think the other thing that you don't realize as you're writing comedy is so much like comedy film is based on the strength of the performance. So stuff that might not be super funny on paper, a good performance, a good comedic actor can take that and make it way better. Ravi is a great example of that, Ravi Patel, because he, that original monologue that we wrote for him, poor guy, like 8 paragraphs of dialogue. He, that was kind of like a more serious thing that he was able to bring his comedic energy to and really make better. And I know because I was the original Robert Nafari that we shot, and I was not a tenth as good as Ravi is.
You were great. But there's
listen, I can hear it in your voice.
You were good, but you definitely were a Robert Nafari, a version of Robert.
Yeah.
No, but you're right. There's
the
just
multiverse.
You were a version.
You did the thing.
You definitely put your image on film.
But you're absolutely right. There's something that great performers just bring, and Ravi's got it. Like whatever it is, and you can see that. And I think I get callous to he's currently on Animal Control on Fox. He's on a currently airing comedy show doing this every week, and you almost get callous to the fact like, oh yeah, he's out there making funny on TV, and then you get him in the room, you're like, oh, this dude's got it.
Yeah,
this is
good.
it. Yeah, right. You're like, oh, this is why he's doing that.
Right.
Like he's got the thing.
Oh, and then when we had Steve Byrne come on, he was there for a day shooting his stuff. He had the whole crew cracking up.
Yes.
Barrett especially. So I mean, it's just like some of those guys, they come in and they turn it on, and it's just automatic for them. I mean, and I say that like I know they work at it. I know it's not, it is a skill set that they continue to hone.
But it's that point where talent meets skill,
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, they had it, and then they did whatever they needed to do to professionalize that. They practiced and honed their craft, and it really shows.
Yeah.
But there is one thing that they do that nobody else does.
Eat ice cream nonstop and then take medication directly after that.
Perfect.
Which again was an ad lib. Take medication directly after that. That was all ad lib.
I changed the whole video based on that line.
Yeah,
That gets so many laughs too. It's so good.
That's part of that. I don't know if that's a spoiler. That's not a spoiler.
Nah.
That portion takes place towards the end of the movie, and it's always nice to know that we got a big laugh coming at the end of the movie.
So maybe last question about the story as we start to wrap up the episode. Was there ever a point once you had the script and you're like, all right, this is done, we feel really good about it, that you thought, this is never going to be a movie?
Only every single day.
And that's funny. And I'm on the opposite end, and that's Danny and I balance each other. I was like, we're doing this. We're going to do this thing, So I was very dedicated to the idea of like, we're going to just keep pushing until we get this thing made. And every movie is a miracle. It's crazy that you get 40 to 50 people together in the same place at the same time, driving in the same direction to pull something like this together.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say for me, it was very much a stakes are high, all in on getting this thing made and doing what we want to do. And as both you guys kind of said, you got to DP your first film, Chuck got to VFX Supervise his first thing. And so being able to provide those opportunities for people. And I mean, we're all living our own lives and are the center of our own universe, and it's really cool. And same for me. I'd never gotten to kind of anchor a feature film.
Right.
And for Danny as well.
Yeah, to direct, right. Yeah. We're all, so to any indie filmmaker out there that's like, oh man, can you do the thing? It's like, yeah, just do the thing. And if you're waiting for somebody to come along and buy your script and give you the money to make the thing, it might not ever happen. So did I have doubt that it was going to happen? No, because I was so committed to this idea of like, it's not going to happen unless we do it. You know, nobody's going to come along and give you your career. You got to go out there and make it happen and take it.
And the great thing about what you guys pulled together was everyone on that set you made them a part of that world, and they were all invested and all gave everything they had every single day of those 3 weeks. And it was a beautiful experience and beautiful to see you guys step into that. Anyway.
Yeah, I think we, the cavalry's not coming, right? That's the general wisdom.
Mark Duplass, yeah.
Yeah.
Indie film icon.
Yep.
And I think that was something that we definitely took to heart and talked about a lot, was kind of taking control of our own destiny and getting to do the thing that we wanted to do on our terms. And I think as the movie's been out and reviews have come in, I feel like that has been kind of an overarching theme is, these guys, this is what indie filmmaking can be like when you don't have a studio looming over you, pulling all the strings. When you get to exercise your own creative vision in a totally free way, then you can make some really interesting, weird stuff. And the movie certainly has some rough edges to it because it is such a low budget indie feature. And we did try to do so much. I mean, we really swung for the fences with it. But I think creatively, it was a super fulfilling experience. And,
absolutely.
And I love that we got to do all the weird ideas that we wanted to do. So yeah, I think it is, that's the thing, right? You just have to go out and do it. And the bar for entry has been lowered to the point that really anybody can do it now. You can shoot a movie on your cell phone. The camera you have in your pocket right now is better than the cameras that they shot the Star Wars prequels on. So you can do it.
I'm sure you've heard the news. The movie industry is dead. And yet, here we are, independent filmmakers all over the world. Never been easier, to Danny's point, to get out there and make your thing and to get it out there. And all of a sudden, you are now part of the movie industry, which will rise from the ashes in some way. A lot of people are doom and gloom about where we're at as an industry because they don't know what's coming. And I think we see a lot of opportunity, right? There's some,
absolutely.
I mean, this art form resonates with millions of people every year. And so we're just so thrilled to get to finally be a part of that on a very personal level with our own project like this.
Yeah. No, that's great. All right, guys. Well, I think that's pretty much covers off on the origins of our story. I think next episode, we'll spend some time talking about how we actually made the movie. We'll get into pre-production. Maybe we'll talk finances.
Ooh, super exciting.
Some of those great things. So appreciate everybody tuning in. Looking forward to our next one where we'll spend some time going a little deeper on the making of Clone Cops.
Hey, Mr. Ice Cream Man, we've been waiting all day. Why you take so long to come back this way?
Every time we screw in the movie,
It's a lot.
that's the thing.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. I get hyped up. I'm Ryan Brown. Come on. Y'all know this.